Well, now I think I'm surprised at the optimism the panel showed, which is always good. Now I'd like to open the questions from the floor. Anybody want to ask any of the speakers questions, what they talked about? If so, I think there's microphones up there that somebody can walk to so we can hear you.
Maybe while we're waiting.
There's a lady here.
Okay. I can't see that. Okay. Here we go.
Oh, I see.
Hello. Yes, I had a question for Ms. Cofman. You were talking about...
I'm sorry, it's very hard to hear.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you mentioned the importance of the youth movement as a resource for change and how important it is to listen to this youth. Now, my question is, how do you communicate with the youth while at the same time maintaining very close relationships with the governments that are not always exactly democratic governments? So how do you combine between this, trying to move change forward while maintaining a good relationships with the regimes? Thank you.
Do you want to collect questions?
No, just take it.
Just, okay, one by one. Well, thanks. I think that's a good question and an important one. And the answer is diplomacy. But I think that we actually have a lot of great tools to do this beyond the very concerted outreach that all of our embassies are engaged in across the region every day, where, of course, we're talking every day not only to governments, but also to NGOs, to students, to educators, to people in the private sector, so that we have a full picture of this very quickly shifting landscape. And doing that listening, asking questions, conveying our own views, making sure people understand our policy, that's what our embassies do. But we have additional tools, I think, that help us in that regard. And one of them, as Ambassador Schlicher mentioned, is MEPI, the Middle East Partnership Initiative, which I'm very proud to supervise. And this is a very important tool for us because it's a program that's designed to support the work of civil society activists across the region, not only through training and capacity building and that kind of traditional stuff, but through small grants that are given out through our embassies all across the region. And these are not sort of determined in advance what topics they're going to focus on. The ideas come from the local organizations on the ground. And that really gets to what Ambassador Schlicher was saying about hearkening to the priorities of the people on the ground and letting them guide our support. They propose projects. It's about helping them do what they're already trying to do. And it's a great program, and it gets all of our embassies engaged directly in the work of supporting civil society in the Arab world.
Excuse me a second. The ambassador of Tunisia would like to make a comment, and would I invite him just to come up here, or wherever.
Oh, he's back at the mic?
He's back at the microphone. Thank you. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank the Middle East Institute for choosing the theme of Arab Awakening as an important part of its annual conference. And I have appreciated very much the richness of the presentations that have been made by the distinguished panelists. I'd like to make one or two comments. One of them concerns the issue of uncertainty. I heard, well, we don't know what will happen in Tunisia. Well, things are not quite clear. Well, I'd like to respond by saying that uncertainty is a normal phenomenon in any transition, but we don't want that uncertainty to last very long. And it is unavoidable in any transition, as we have seen in the past transitions to democracy in other countries. What is really, what could be worrying is the lack of clarity in those transitions. But in the case of Tunisia, there is a clear vision for the future. And that vision has been really implemented since the early days of after the revolution. We do have a clear vision. We organized elections, and those elections went very well. They were credible, transparent, as it was confirmed by international observers, and a great number of them have come from the United States. We do have a vision concerning the economic and social development of the country, and the outgoing government has prepared a comprehensive plan for that. The issue of jobs is a priority, is a top priority. The issue of regional development is also another important issue, and all this, and the plan also focuses on a variety of reforms, political reforms, economic reforms, social reforms, the reform of the financial sector, the reform of the banking sector, the reform of education, and we hope that people, and especially investors, understand that they shouldn't wait. They should think about Tunisia, about the success of Tunisia as something that would encourage them to go and explore the opportunities that new Tunisia offers in terms of investment. Because without investment, we will not be able to respond to the aspirations of our youth for jobs and for dignity. And I think that the initiative that the State Department has taken, and I would like to pay tribute to the Secretary of State for organizing a day on investment in Tunisia. That partnership day is really an eloquent testimony of the support that the United States is giving Tunisia. So I would like to highlight the connection between economic development and transition to democracy. They are very well connected. Tunisia, of course, counts on itself, on its own capacities, and it has the means to succeed. The ingredients of success are there. And a large middle class. The role of women is very important. Tunisian women enjoy far-reaching rights. We are a moderate society, and I think that people should believe in the ability of Tunisia to succeed. We count on ourselves, but we also count on the support of our friends and partners. And we welcome investors to come and invest in Tunisia and invest in a nascent democracy. And I think it will be in the interest of all. So that issue of uncertainty, I hope it will not discourage others to come and support and invest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This young lady here.
I just have one. Can you hear me?
No.
It's on. Do you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
just
Okay.
get very close to it.
I just have one quick question. A couple of you touched on the U.S.'s role in the Arab awakening, as we need to invest in their voices and support them if they need economic aid and if they call for it. There are some countries, such as Libya, they have resources, they have funds that they could use to ensure that they achieve their goals and that democracy prevails, but their assets have yet to be unfrozen. Not just by us, but like in the international community as well. What do you think is preventing us from unfreezing them and letting them use the resources that they have to further their goals? Thanks.
Sure. Well, let me try and tackle that. Number one, I think you're absolutely right that the key here is to facilitate an environment where those on the ground can make use of their own resources and in order to further their own goals. In the Libyan case, the Transitional National Council knows that it has a really tough job ahead in moving forward a country whose social infrastructure, political infrastructure was eviscerated by the previous regime. And so it's a tremendous undertaking. And they do have resources, and they do have natural resources that they're already producing and selling and getting income from. But they know also that their own citizens are looking to them to ensure that those resources are husbanded and managed in a way that's transparent and that people can trust, very unlike the previous regime. And so the TNC is working hard to put into place the financial management systems it needs in order to manage those Libyan resources in a way that the Libyan people have confidence in. So as we move forward, and as others in the international community move forward with transferring assets and unfreezing assets, we're working jointly through the UN and in other ways in consultation, and very much in consultation with the TNC, so that we provide those assets at a rate and in a manner that works for them and for the financial management systems that they're setting up.
I see there's so many people and so little time, so I think what I'd like to do is take 3 questions at a time. I think 3 is about the maximum some people can remember. So we just take 2 from over here and 1 from here.
My name's Sean Borg. I'm a student at American University. My question has to do with a regional conflict. Ambassador Schlicher, you stated that a regional war could be very devastating to the stability of it. What, if any, effect would a conflict with Iran do to change the stability of the region? And also, on part of stability is, are the youth going to get tired and eventually start caving to more violent and radical movements coming in and infiltrating their desires to change, especially in Egypt? Thank you.
Nothing would do more to keep Iran in check than to have an Arab awakening amongst Sunni Syria. Iran could easily lose its only major ally. To what extent is Iran propping up Bashar al-Assad? What is the Bayvak and al-Quds presence on the ground in Syria?
And my question follows up on Ron Schlicher's very justified credit to the administration for having a variety of administration officials that are engaged in different places in the Arab awakening where their particular talents or travel schedule seems to work out. But my question is for Tamara. Are we also seeing a new policy in this administration toward the public activities of U.S. diplomats on the scene, in the country, whereas previously we just sort of sent them out there to talk to governments and report back? We now seem to be doing some very imaginative, even risky sometimes things like telling, letting Bob Ford drive down to Hama just ahead of Syrian military units, or virtually parachuting U.S. diplomats into Benghazi and Tripoli during very fluid political situations when there really wasn't established people for them to be talking to. But we sent them in just to have kind of a presence on the ground and take advantage of the fluid political situation and the media opportunities it provides.
Do I start first?
I'll start. Thanks very much for the questions about Iran. When you posed the questions, it was clear to me that Iran really had not come up as a specific topic in any of our presentations, and it probably should have. The context that I mentioned that Iran is relevant to was the current focus in the Arab states is very much a domestic one, and are there any sorts of intervening events that could change that focus or alter that focus, or at least give multiple foci to the political forces in the region? And I said a regional war clearly could. A regional war could certainly, become the constant topic in the media. A regional conflict with Iran would certainly be big news in the sense that it would sharpen the Sunni-Shia cleavages throughout the region in a very real way. It would probably create new tensions in Lebanon. It would probably create new tensions along the Israeli-Lebanese border. It would create some tensions in Syria, although at this point I think that Syria is probably moving according to Syrian rhythms instead of Iranian rhythms. And that touches on the second question. To what extent is Iran trying to prop up Bashar and his regime? And I have to say that, I've been out of the info flow for about 3 months now, But my strong impression is that at different points over the last 8 months or so that Bashar has been having his difficulties, the Iranians have tried to find ways to give material and security and certainly political support to Bashar, although I do think that it's notable that at a couple of points publicly, Iranian officialdom actually did rather explicitly criticize Bashar. So I think you see a situation where even the Iranians, and even as important as Bashar and the Alawi regime is to Iran's regional calculations, the Iranians appear to be trying to hedge their bets a little bit about what's going to happen as well. And to me, that's related to the point I made about if we have a Sunni-led Syria, there's going to be this enormous competition for influence between all sorts of players. Ourselves, the Turks, the French, the Russians, the Iranians, the Saudis, the Qataris, the UAE, et cetera, et cetera. So the question of Iran is enormously important. What will be the effect for Iran and Iran's regional strategies and calculations if they lose their great Syrian ally? Will they naturally try to bolster their influence in Iraq, where they do have, history, commonality with lots of the factions in Iraq, a long border, et cetera? Or will they try to come up with new and different and more subtle strategies? I don't think we know yet. I think they probably don't know yet. But again, a regional war could be one of those intervening events that changes the focus from the domestic issues a little bit. And as Dan was talking about the peace process, it struck me that, we could have intervening events that don't necessarily negatively impact on developments in these countries, but we might, if we were really lucky, have some progress on these issues that could create a more positive and conducive atmosphere for political and economic development in some of these states as well. I mean, that's extremely optimistic, but it is something to consider and think about and try even maybe to make happen.
Oh, yeah. So on David Mack's question about the instructions that we give to our ambassadors in the region, as I said in my opening remarks, I think that from the beginning of the administration, we've put a very strong emphasis on building relationships, not just government to government, but people to people. And our embassies and our ambassadors have been a hugely important part of that effort. Also, trying to leverage technology and trying to leverage new media to expand the ways that we communicate with people in the Arab world and around the world. And as Secretary Clinton said when she spoke at the National Democratic Institute a week or so ago, we have, of course, sent out guidance to all of our ambassadors in the field, consistent with the President's policy announcement on May 19th that it's our policy to support democratic transitions and reform across the region, and all of our ambassadors are working to implement that guidance as well. So,
fine. Could we have the last two questions here?
I'd just like to follow up that question about democracy, because the U.S. has had a very close relationship with the Egyptian military for 30 years, and yet it seems that the Egyptian military right now are the ones that are really dragging their feet and prolonging the process. If we have another Tahrir Square, how do you see U.S. policy evolving?
In October 1789, George Washington wrote a letter on the French Revolution to Gouverneur Morris, our ambassador in Paris. He wrote, "The revolution which has been effected in France is of so wonderful a nature that the mind can hardly realize the fact. But I fear, though it has gone triumphantly through the first paroxysm, it is not the last it has to encounter before matters are finally settled. The revolution is of too great a magnitude to be effected in so short a space, and with the loss of so little blood." Washington's apprehension proved true about the French Revolution, and that last sentence haunts me. Is history repeating itself?
Egyptian military?
Dan, you want to talk about Egypt?
On the Egypt question, there's a very actually perceptive article this morning. I saw it online in the New York Times, in which the dilemmas of the administration are laid out quite clearly. On the one hand, the administration would like to see the Egyptian military open up as much political space in as little time as possible, consistent with the need for an orderly and effective transition. And on the other hand, the administration would like to be able to maintain its longstanding relationship, particularly our security assistance relationship and our mill-mill relationship that has provided, as Ron suggested in his remarks, very tangible national strategic benefits to the United States. And so this is the dilemma. You know, this is not going to be a straight line process in which the administration and the Egyptian military and the opposition elements within Egypt are going to agree. There's going to be pushes and pulls and tugs and all the rest. One can recall, for example, in the early days after the Tahrir uprising, there were voices within the administration that were suggesting that maybe things in Egypt were going too fast because there was this idea of parliamentary elections in September, followed by an immediate constitutional reform, and then presidential elections. Now there may be some voices that are suggesting that the transition is going a little bit too slowly, that there may be a need to speed it up in order to effect that transition. And I think it's a fair issue for policy debate in Washington, but it's also fair to understand that the same debate with real tangible implications is going to take place in Egypt. Right. We tend to hear from those who speak in Egypt. We don't, of course, hear from what we used to call the silent majority, but there's also a population in Egypt that is nervous about fast transitions and nervous about the military perhaps moving out of its Praetorian role as quickly as some would like. So I think both societies, Egypt where it counts for immediate terms and here where we have very significant policy interests, we're going to see this tug of war within the policy community go on for some time to come.
Just add something briefly here. Number one, I think Dan's absolutely right. Of course, this is a subject for debate in Washington, but fundamentally it's a subject that's being debated in Cairo, and it's a decision that's going to be taken in Cairo. It's an Egyptian decision. And I think this gets to one of the sort of recurring themes through all of our discussion up here, which is, you know, what is the relative importance of the U.S. role in these events as opposed to, you know, what's actually taking place on the ground. And, you know, you heard from me on that score. You heard Steve say, you know, in some ways he sees what's happened in the Middle East partly as a result of American weakness, which it seems to me in some ways might be as, in some ways as myopic a view as saying it's because of American strength. I think that what happened in the region is because of what's been going on in the region. And it's very much driven by trends within these societies. And I think the outcomes are going to be driven by trends within these societies. But we have an interest and we have a role to play in seeking to promote outcomes that we believe will be stable and will contribute to peace and prosperity and to our interests thereby. And I think this is my last point. A lot of us and a lot of the questions also have talked about economics and the relationship between economic progress and democratic development. And I think it's so important that we keep an eye on this because it's an absolutely crucial factor in what's going to take place. Somebody asked whether we're going to have the foreign assistance resources necessary to hold these economies up. But as I think you heard from Ambassador Takaya, that's not what the countries of the region are looking for. And of course, that's not really the best way we can play our role. I think what's ultimately going to produce sustainable growth and equitable growth in these societies is private sector and business-to-business ties. And part of our role is not only by ourselves, but working with other countries to create a trade and investment framework that will support that kind of private sector-led growth and private sector-led job creation. And so that takes me to one final thing I just wanted to say as we wrap up, which is, we have to do this together with others in the international community. All of us have a stake in what happens in the Middle East. This is a tremendously strategic region for the entire world. And we are working closely with others in the international community. You can call that, if you wish, the G20ification of national security issues. I guess I would just call it diplomacy.
Are we out of time?
Yes, I'm afraid we're out of time. I want to thank our fine group of panelists and our moderator for this wonderful panel. Thank you all so much. Our next panel begins at 10:45. It's the road ahead for emerging Arab democracies. Please join us again in 15 minutes. In the meantime, please browse our journals or make a contribution to MEI. See you all shortly.
Yeah, I need to do that too.
Thank you, moderator. Supposed to stay away from it for a year. Remember? But I miss you guys very much.